The Duke locked his pregnant wife away to please his mistress until London bowed before the true Duchess. She felt the key turn in the lock from the outside, heard his footsteps retreat down the corridor, and pressed her palm against the swell of her belly where their child grew, unwanted by its father, inconvenient to his mistress. Arabella Thornbury, Duchess of Ravenscroft, stood alone in the East Wing Tower Room, not quite a prison, but close enough, and understood with crystalline clarity that her husband had chosen. He had chosen the opera singer with sapphire eyes and a laugh like breaking glass over the wife who carried his heir. He had chosen passion over duty, scandal over honor, and now Arabella would pay the price for loving a man who had never learned to love her back. Wait, before the next confession unfolds. If this story has already stirred your heart, tell us where you're watching from. To make sure you don't miss the next betrayal, kiss, or redemption, subscribe and join our circle. The next heartbeat might change everything. Now, back to the scene. The room was beautifully appointed at least. Alexander had not been cruel enough to lock her in squalor. The walls were papered in cream silk, the furniture was rosewood and velvet, and through the tall windows she could see the gardens of Ravenscroft Manor stretching toward the London skyline in the distance. A gilded cage was still a cage. Arabella moved to the writing desk and sat carefully, her body already changing in ways that both awed and frightened her. 4 months along, the physician had said. 4 months of carrying the future Duke of Ravenscroft while her husband parading his mistress through every drawing room in London. She had not told him immediately when she discovered her condition. Perhaps that had been her first mistake. She had waited, planning the perfect moment, imagining his face when she revealed that they would finally have the child they'd hoped for during their first year of marriage, before everything had gone so terribly wrong. But there had been no perfect moment, and when she'd finally told him 3 weeks ago, standing in his study while he reviewed correspondence with barely concealed impatience, his reaction had been worse than indifference. "Are you certain?" he'd asked, not looking up from his papers. "Yes, Dr. Matthews confirmed it." "I see." A long pause. "Then you'll need to retire from society for the duration. Go to the country estate. Take whatever servants you need." "Alexander, I hoped this might—" "Might what, Arabella?" Finally, he'd looked at her, and his green eyes had been cold as winter sea. "Might fix our marriage? Might make me forget that you trapped me into this union in the first place?" The accusation had stolen her breath. "Trapped you? We married because—" "Because your father and mine arranged it when we were children. Because duty demanded it. Because I was foolish enough to believe that obligation might transform into affection." He'd stood then, walking to the window, his back to her. "But you can't manufacture love, Arabella. And you can't compete with someone who actually stirs my blood." "You mean Lady Sinclair?" The name had tasted like poison on her tongue. "Vivian understands me. She makes me feel alive in ways you never could." "She's married to someone else, Alexander, and she's using you for your title and your money." He'd spun then, fury lighting his face. "Don't presume to tell me about Vivian. You know nothing about what we share. I know she laughs at you behind your back. I know she calls you her useful duke when she drinks too much champagne. I know she has at least 2 other lovers." The slap had come so fast she hadn't seen coming. Her cheek had bloomed with heat and shock, and Alexander had stood there, his hand still raised, looking as surprised as she felt. "Get out," he'd said quietly. "Go to the country. Stay there until the child is born. I don't want to see you. And I certainly don't want Vivian upset by the sight of you waddling around London in your condition. Alexander. That's an order, Arabella, as your husband and your duke." She had fled then, tears blinding her, one hand pressed to her stinging cheek and the other protective over her belly. But she hadn't gone to the country. She'd refused. And so he'd locked her here, in the east wing of their London townhouse, where visiting nobility wouldn't see her, where his mistress wouldn't be reminded that he had a wife at all. That had been 2 weeks ago. Arabella pulled a sheet of paper toward her now and picked up her pen. She had written letters every day since her confinement. Letters to her father, the Earl of Westmere, begging him to intervene. Letters to Alexander's mother, the Dowager Duchess, explaining the situation. Letters to her few remaining friends in society, asking for help. None of them had been sent. Because Mrs. Daventry, the housekeeper Alexander had assigned to care for her, checked every piece of correspondence that left Arabella's room. The woman was loyal to Alexander, or perhaps to Lady Sinclair. It amounted to the same thing. So Arabella wrote the letters anyway, pouring her desperation onto paper that would never be read, and tried to think of a way out. A soft knock on the door made her look up. "Your Grace?" Mrs. Daventry's voice was brisk, professional. "I've brought your dinner." The key turned, and the housekeeper entered bearing a tray. She was a handsome woman in her 50s, gray-haired and stern-faced, and she performed her duties with mechanical efficiency. "Thank you, Mrs. Daventry," Arabella said quietly. The housekeeper set down the tray. Roasted chicken, vegetables, bread, and tea. A perfectly adequate meal for a prisoner. "Will there be anything else, Your Grace?" "Yes, actually." Arabella straightened in her chair. "I'd like to send a letter to my father." "I'm afraid that's not possible." "I'm a duchess, Mrs. Daventry, not a criminal. You cannot keep me from corresponding with my own family." "The Duke has given specific instructions, Your Grace. No correspondence in or out without his approval." "Then get his approval." "The Duke is dining at Lord Ashworth's this evening, with Lady Sinclair." Mrs. Daventry's face remained neutral, but Arabella caught the faint gleam of satisfaction in her eyes. The woman was enjoying this. "Of course he is." Arabella kept her voice steady. "Then I'll wait until he returns." "As you wish, Your Grace." Mrs. Daventry curtsied and moved toward the door. "Mrs. Daventry," Arabella called, "why do you dislike me so much?" The housekeeper paused, her hand on the door handle. For a moment, Arabella thought she might actually answer honestly. "It's not my place to like or dislike you, Your Grace. I simply follow the Duke's orders." "Even when those orders are cruel? Even when they involve imprisoning a pregnant woman?" "The Duke knows what's best for his household." Mrs. Daventry's voice was firm. "And if I may speak plainly, Your Grace, you brought this upon yourself. A wife should know her place. She should make her husband happy, not drive him into the arms of another woman." The words landed like physical blows. "I see," Arabella said softly. "You may go." The door closed. The key turned, and Arabella sat alone with her dinner and her despair. One hand pressed to her belly, where the child kicked, strong and insistent, demanding to be born into a world where its father didn't want it. She would not cry. She had spent too many nights crying already. Instead, she ate her dinner methodically, feeding herself and the life inside her, and began to plan. If no one would help her, she would help herself. The escape attempt came 3 days later, at dawn, when the household was just beginning to stir. Arabella had spent the previous day feigning illness, refusing her meals, complaining of dizziness and pain. Mrs. Daventry had been concerned enough to send for Dr. Matthews, who had examined Arabella and prescribed rest and bland foods. "The pregnancy is proceeding normally," he'd told Mrs. Daventry in the hallway, not knowing that Arabella could hear every word through the door. "But Her Grace is under significant stress. I'd recommend she be allowed to move about more freely, perhaps take walks in the garden. Confinement is not good for a woman in her condition." "I'll relay your recommendations to the Duke," Mrs. Daventry had replied, her tone making it clear she would do no such thing. That night, Arabella had torn her bedsheets into strips and tied them together, testing each knot carefully. The window was 3 stories up, but there was a balcony 1 floor below, and below that, the garden. If she could lower herself to the balcony, she could use the trellis to climb down the rest of the way. It was madness. She knew it was madness. But anything was better than staying locked in this room while her husband flaunted his mistress and her child grew toward a birth that no one wanted. She'd waited until she heard Mrs. Daventry's footsteps retreat after the evening bed check, then counted to 1,000 to be safe. Then she'd opened the window, secured one end of her makeshift rope to the bed frame, and climbed out into the night. The London air was cool against her face, and for a moment, dangling above the garden with her hands gripping torn bedsheets, Arabella felt gloriously, terrifyingly free. Then the sheet tore. She fell, crashing onto the balcony below with a force that knocked the air from her lungs. Pain exploded through her side, sharp and terrible, and she curled around her belly instinctively, protecting the child, even as her own body screamed. Voices, running footsteps, lights flaring in windows. "Your Grace! My God, what have you done?" Mrs. Daventry's face appeared above her, white with shock. Behind her, other servants crowded, gasping and exclaiming. "The baby!" Arabella gasped. "Please, the baby! Someone fetch Dr. Matthews, now!" Strong hands lifted her, carried her back inside. She had a confused impression of corridors and stairs, and then her own bed beneath her, soft and treacherous. Dr. Matthews arrived within the hour, his face grave. He examined her carefully while Mrs. Daventry hovered, and Arabella bit her lip to keep from crying out. "No broken bones," he said finally. "Severe bruising to the ribs and hip. The child," he pressed his hand to her belly, feeling for movement. "The child seems to have survived the fall. But, Your Grace, you must rest completely. No movement, no stress. You could have killed yourself and the baby." "I want to leave," Arabella whispered. "I can't stay here. I can't." "Shh, rest now. We'll discuss this later." But they wouldn't discuss it later. Arabella knew that. She'd failed, and now they would watch her even more carefully. She'd traded one prison for a stricter one. Dr. Matthews left instructions with Mrs. Daventry and departed. The housekeeper stood at the foot of Arabella's bed, her expression unreadable. "I should inform the Duke," she said. "Don't," Arabella forced the word past her swollen lip. "Please, he'll only be angry." "He has a right to know his wife tried to escape out a window. He has a right to know he locked his pregnant wife in a tower like a fairy tale villain," Arabella shot back. "Tell him if you want. Tell him I'd rather risk death than stay imprisoned at his pleasure. See if he cares." Mrs. Daventry's face tightened, but she didn't argue. She simply turned and left, locking the door behind her. Arabella lay in the darkness, pain radiating through her body, and felt something shift inside her. Not the baby, something else, something harder and colder than despair. Rage. Pure, crystalline rage at the man who had done this to her, at the mistress who had encouraged it, at the society that would blame Arabella for her husband's infidelity, that would whisper she deserved her suffering because she'd failed to keep her husband satisfied. She would not die here. She would not let her child be born in captivity and raised by a father who didn't want them. She would survive, and somehow she would make them all pay. The letter arrived 2 weeks after her fall, delivered not by Mrs. Daventry, but by a young maid Arabella had never seen before. "Your Grace," the girl whispered, pressing a folded paper into Arabella's hand. "I was told to give this to you in secret. Don't let Mrs. Daventry see." Before Arabella could ask who had sent her, the girl was gone. Arabella unfolded the letter with trembling hands. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, unfamiliar. "Dearest Duchess, you don't know me, but I know you. More importantly, I know what your husband has done to you, and I am appalled. My name is Lady Marguerite Blackwood. I am what society calls a scandalous woman, a widow who speaks her mind, manages her own fortune, and refuses to remarry simply because men find me inconvenient. I have watched your husband parade his mistress through London while you've mysteriously disappeared from society, and I have made it my business to discover where you've gone. I know you're locked in the East Wing. I know about your condition, and I know that you tried to escape 2 weeks ago. I'm writing to offer you an alternative. I have a house in Bloomsbury, away from fashionable society. It's quiet, private, and most importantly, it's mine. No husband, no guardian, no man has any authority over it. If you can get out of that room, if you can make it to the garden gate on the north side of the property, my carriage will be waiting tomorrow night at midnight. The gate will be unlocked. I've bribed a footman. You don't have to trust me, but I think you're desperate enough to try. Come to Bloomsbury, have your child in safety, and when you're ready, I'll help you take back everything your husband has stolen from you, your freedom, your dignity, and your place in society. Trust yourself, if no one else. M.B." Arabella read the letter 3 times, her heart pounding. It could be a trap. It could be Alexander testing her, or Lady Sinclair playing some cruel game. But it could also be real. She pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the strong kicks of the child inside her. 5 months along now, the baby growing despite everything, stubborn and persistent, like its mother. Tomorrow night at midnight, the North Garden Gate, a carriage to freedom. Arabella folded the letter carefully and hid it beneath her mattress. Then she lay back on her pillows and began to plan for the second time. This time, she would not fail. The next night, Arabella waited until Mrs. Daventry completed her evening bed check, then counted to 2,000 instead of 1,000. She dressed in her darkest gown, pinned her hair tightly, and wrapped a cloak around her shoulders. The door was locked, of course, but Arabella had been watching, learning, planning. She'd noticed that the lock was old, and that if she slid a thin piece of metal, a hairpin for instance, into the mechanism at the right angle, she could sometimes feel the tumbler shift. It took her 45 agonizing minutes, her fingers cramping, sweat dripping down her back despite the cool night air. But finally, she felt something give. The lock clicked open. Arabella stood frozen, hardly daring to breathe, waiting for alarms or footsteps or discovery. Nothing. She opened the door and stepped into the corridor. The house was dark and silent, the servants long since retired to their quarters. She knew the way to the North Garden Gate. She'd memorized the layout of the house during her imprisonment, studying it from her window, planning every step. She moved like a ghost through her own home, one hand trailing along the wall for balance, the other protective over her belly. Down the servants' stair, through the back hallway, past the kitchen where the banked fire still glowed. The door to the garden was unlocked. Someone, the bribed footman perhaps, had kept their word. Arabella stepped out into the night and nearly sobbed with relief. Fresh air, open sky, freedom so close she could taste it. The North Gate was exactly where Lady Margaret had said it would be, and standing open. Beyond it, a plain black carriage waited, its driver seated impassively on the box. Arabella hurried toward it as fast as her condition would allow, her breath coming in short gasps, her heart hammering. She was 10 feet from the gate when the voice stopped her cold. "Going somewhere, wife?" Alexander stepped out of the shadows beside the gate, his face illuminated by the carriage lamp. He was dressed for an evening out, elegant in black and white, and his expression was one of cold fury. "How—" Arabella's voice failed. "How did I know? Mrs. Daventry brought me the letter. The little maid who delivered it to you is in her employ, not Lady Marguerite's. Did you really think you could conspire against me in my own house?" The trap closed around her like iron jaws. Arabella wanted to scream, to run, to fight, but her body was heavy with pregnancy and exhaustion, and Alexander stood between her and the only escape. "Let me go," she whispered. "Please, Alexander, let me go."
"So you can run off with that meddling widow and plot against me? So you can embarrass me further in society?" He stepped closer. "You're my wife, Arabella, my property. You go nowhere without my permission. I'm not your property. I'm a human being, and I'm carrying your child. A child I never wanted. Not with you." The words were brutal, deliberate. "Did you think pregnancy would make me love you? Did you think giving me an heir would somehow fix what's broken between us? I thought it might remind you that you made vows, that you promised before God. God isn't in this marriage, Arabella. There's nothing in this marriage except duty and disappointment." He reached for her arm. "Come, back to your room, and this time I'll make sure you can't pick the lock." "No!" Arabella wrenched away from him. "I won't go back. I won't spend another day locked in that room while you humiliate me with your mistress. I won't let my child be born in a prison. You'll do as I say. I'll die first." The words hung in the air between them, raw and true. Arabella meant them. She would rather throw herself in the Thames than return to that tower room, to that suffocating cage. Alexander's face shifted, something flickering in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps? Or the faintest hint of shame? "Arabella, your Grace!" A woman's voice called from the house, shrill and delighted. "Are you out here? I've been looking everywhere for you." Lady Vivian Sinclair appeared on the terrace, resplendent in crimson silk, diamonds glittering at her throat. She stopped when she saw Arabella, her perfect face curving into a smile that was pure malice. "Oh," she purred, "how charming! A family reunion. Though I must say, Duchess, you look positively dreadful. Pregnancy doesn't agree with you." Arabella felt something inside her snap. All the rage, all the humiliation, all the desperate fury of the past months crystallized into perfect clarity. "Get out of my house," she said, her voice deadly quiet. Vivian laughed. "Your house? Darling, I think you'll find this is Alexander's house, and Alexander wants me here. This house belongs to the Duchy of Ravencroft, and I am the Duchess of Ravencroft." Arabella drew herself up to her full height, ignoring the pain in her ribs, the exhaustion in her bones. "You are nothing but a married woman playing at being a mistress, and I want you out of my home." "Alexander," Vivian said, her voice dripping with amusement, "your wife is being ridiculous. Tell her." "Be silent, Vivian." Alexander's voice was sharp, and both women turned to stare at him in surprise. He was looking at Arabella with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Go inside, Vivian. I need to speak with my wife alone." "But darling—" "Now." Lady Sinclair's face darkened with anger, but she had enough self-preservation to obey. She swept past Arabella with a contemptuous glance and disappeared into the house. Alexander and Arabella stood alone in the garden, the night air cool between them. "You've never stood up to her before," he said. "You've never stood up to me. I was trying to be a good wife, a dutiful wife. It didn't work." Arabella's voice was tired, all the fight draining out of her. "Alexander, I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this. Let me go to the country. Let me have the baby in peace. I'll give you your heir, and then we can discuss terms." "Terms? For our separation. I assume that's what you want. You can have your mistress, your freedom. I'll be the quiet Duchess in the country, raising the child, staying out of your way." Alexander was silent for a long moment, and in the lamplight, Arabella saw something shift in his face. "Is that really what you think I want? Isn't it?" He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking exhausted. "I don't know what I want anymore, Arabella. I thought I wanted Vivian. I thought I wanted a life free from the obligations our marriage represented. But tonight, when Mrs. Daventry told me you were trying to escape again, when I realized you would rather risk your life than stay with me," he trailed off, "it made me see how far I've fallen, what I've become. You locked me in a tower, Alexander. You chose your mistress over your wife and child. I don't think there's anything left to salvage here." "Probably not," he admitted. "But, Arabella, I won't let you leave like this, not in the middle of the night, running to some widow I don't trust. If you want to go to the country, go. I'll arrange it tomorrow. Comfortable rooms, staff you choose, complete freedom. You'll want for nothing. And after the child is born, we'll discuss it then. But I promise you, no more locked doors, no more prison." His eyes met hers, and for the first time in months, she saw genuine remorse there. "I'm sorry. For all of it. You deserved better than what I gave you. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was more than she'd had an hour ago." "I want to leave tomorrow," she said. "Not next week. Tomorrow." "Agreed. And I want to choose my own household staff. No more Mrs. Daventry." "Done. And, Alexander," Arabella's voice hardened, "if you ever lock me in a room again, if you ever lay a hand on me in anger again, I will take our child and disappear so thoroughly you'll never find us. I don't care if I have to flee to America or India. I will not be your prisoner." He flinched as if she'd struck him. "I understand. Good." She turned to walk back into the house, done with him, done with everything. "Arabella," he called, "for what it's worth, I am glad the baby survived your fall, and I'm glad you survived it too." She didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge the words, simply kept walking, back into the house that had been her prison for one final night. Tomorrow she would leave, and she would never, ever come back. The country estate, Thornbury Hall in Somerset, was everything London had not been. Spacious, peaceful, and most importantly, hers to command. Alexander had been true to his word. He'd sent her there with a generous allowance, a staff she'd personally selected, and complete autonomy. He also sent letters. They arrived once a week, stilted and awkward, filled with news of London and careful inquiries about her health. Arabella didn't respond to most of them, but she kept them anyway, filing them in a drawer in her study, unsure why she couldn't bring herself to throw them away. The baby grew. Arabella grew, and slowly, carefully, she began to heal. She hired a companion, Miss Sarah Fletcher, a sensible woman of 30, who had been a governess before her employer's death left her seeking new employment. Sarah was calm, intelligent, and refreshingly blunt.
"Your husband sounds like an absolute cad," she said when Arabella explained the situation. "Locking you in a tower? Good grief! What century does he think this is?" Arabella laughed and realized it was the first time she'd laughed in months. She also wrote to Lady Marguerite Blackwood, explaining what had happened and thanking her for the attempted rescue. To her surprise, Lady Marguerite wrote back immediately, and soon they were corresponding regularly. The widow was as sharp and scandalous as her reputation suggested, and her letters were full of London gossip and biting observations about society. "Your husband's mistress is already losing her appeal," Lady Marguerite wrote in one letter. "Apparently Lady Sinclair was seen at the opera with Lord Pemberton, and the Duke of Ravenscroft looked positively murderous. Trouble in paradise, perhaps?" Arabella didn't care about Alexander's troubles with his mistress. She cared about the life growing inside her, about the child who kicked stronger every day, who would be born in freedom rather than captivity. Dr. Matthews visited monthly, pronouncing her and the baby healthy.
"You've bloomed in the country air, Your Grace," he said approvingly. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." What she was doing was learning to live again. She walked in the gardens every morning. She read books from the extensive library. She planned a nursery with Sarah's help, choosing cheerful yellow wallpaper and white furniture. And she wrote. Pages and pages of writing. Her story, her truth, everything that had happened. She didn't know what she would do with it, but putting it on paper felt like lancing a wound, letting the poison out. The baby was born on a mild evening in late September, after 12 hours of labor that left Arabella exhausted and triumphant. The midwife placed the child in her arms, a daughter, perfect and screaming, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably be green like her father's. "She's beautiful, Your Grace," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "She's mine," Arabella whispered, touching her daughter's tiny hand. "No one can take her from me. She's mine." They named her Beatrice, after Arabella's grandmother. And Arabella sent a brief letter to Alexander in London. "Your daughter was born on September 28th. Her name is Beatrice. We are both well." His response arrived 3 days later, a lengthy letter that Arabella read with trembling hands. "Dearest Arabella, I am overwhelmed with relief to hear that you and Beatrice are well. I know I have no right to express joy at her birth, no right to claim any connection to either of you after what I've done, but I am joyful nonetheless. I need to tell you something. I've ended my association with Lady Sinclair. It was overdue, and it should never have begun. She was not what I thought she was, or perhaps I was willfully blind to what she truly was. I've been doing a great deal of thinking these past months, about our marriage, about my failures as a husband, about what I threw away for something that was never real. I don't expect forgiveness."
I don't even expect you to read this entire letter, but I need you to know that I was wrong about everything, and if you'll allow it, I would like to visit Thornbury Hall to meet my daughter. I will understand if you refuse, but I'm asking anyway. With deepest regret and hope, Alexander. Arabella read the letter twice, then carried it to the fireplace. She should burn it, should send him a curt refusal and cut all ties beyond the necessary legal and financial ones. But she looked down at Beatrice, sleeping peacefully in her cradle, and thought about the future, about what it would mean for her daughter to grow up without a father, about whether Alexander had truly changed, or if this was just another manipulation. "What do you think, my darling?" she whispered to the sleeping baby. "Should we let him meet you, or should we protect ourselves from him forever?" Beatrice didn't answer, of course, but in the morning Arabella wrote a careful reply. "You may visit, once. If you bring your mistress or speak of her in any capacity, you will be asked to leave immediately and not return. If you upset Beatrice in any way, the same applies. You may come on October 15th between 2 and 4 o'clock. This is not forgiveness. This is simply acknowledgement that you have a biological connection to my daughter. Arabella. She sent the letter before she could change her mind, and then spent the next 2 weeks in a state of nervous anticipation, unsure whether she was doing the right thing or making a terrible mistake. Alexander arrived exactly at 2 o'clock on October 15th, driving himself in a simple carriage with no crest or ostentation. Arabella watched from the drawing-room window as he climbed down, and was startled by his appearance. He'd lost weight. There were new lines around his eyes and mouth, and his clothes, while perfectly tailored, hung slightly loose on his frame. He looked older, wearier, and somehow more human than the cold Duke she had left in London. Sarah showed him into the drawing-room, and Arabella rose to greet him with careful formality. "Your Grace," she said, curtsying slightly. "Arabella." His eyes devoured her face, searching for something. "You look radiant." "I'm well. The country agrees with me." Awkward silence stretched between them. Then Alexander cleared his throat. May I see her?" Arabella nodded to Sarah, who left and returned moments later carrying Beatrice. The baby was awake, her green eyes, so like her father's, wide and curious. Alexander's face crumpled with emotion as Sarah placed Beatrice in his arms. "She's perfect," he whispered. "My God, Arabella, she's absolutely perfect." "Be careful with her head," Arabella said automatically, and was surprised when Alexander adjusted his hold with practiced ease. "I've been reading," he said quietly, not looking up from his daughter's face. "Books on infant care. I wanted to know, I needed to understand what you'd been through." Arabella felt something shift in her chest, a tiny crack in the armor she'd built around her heart. They sat together in the drawing room for the next 2 hours, and Alexander held Beatrice the entire time, marveling at her tiny fingers, her perfect features, the way she gripped his hand when he offered it. "I've been a fool," he said eventually. "Worse than a fool. I've been cruel and selfish and blind. Arabella, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that I've spent every day since you left London regretting my choices, wishing I could go back and be the husband you deserved." "Why the change?" Arabella asked carefully. "What happened with Lady Sinclair?" His jaw tightened. "I discovered she'd been using me, not just for money and status, but she'd been selling information about my finances to my business rivals. She'd been manipulating me to make poor investments that benefited her other lovers." When I confronted her, she laughed, said I deserved it for being stupid enough to fall for her act. "I tried to tell you." "I know. You tried to warn me, and I struck you for it." His voice broke. "That's the moment I can't forgive myself for, Arabella. The moment I laid hands on you in anger. Every time I close my eyes, I see your face, the shock and pain. I am so deeply sorry." Beatrice made a small sound, and Alexander looked down at her with infinite tenderness. "I want to be better," he said quietly. "Not for me, for her. I want to be a father she can be proud of, and I want to try to be the husband I should have been all along. Alexander, I know it's too late. I know I destroyed what we had. But Arabella, if you'll give me a chance, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I've changed. I'll court you properly, the way I should have when we were first married. I'll earn your trust back, one day at a time." Arabella stood and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where she'd found peace. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she said honestly. "You hurt me so badly, Alexander. You made me feel worthless, unwanted. You locked me away like I was nothing." "I know. And Even if you have changed, even if you truly regret what you've done, that doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't erase the nights I spent crying, wondering what was wrong with me, why I wasn't enough. There was nothing wrong with you, Alexander said fiercely. The fault was entirely mine. You are brave and intelligent and far stronger than I ever gave you credit for. You are enough, Arabella. You've always been enough. She turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. Then why wasn't I enough to keep you faithful? Why did you need someone else? Because I was a coward who confused excitement with love, who ran from real intimacy toward shallow pleasure. He stood carefully, still holding Beatrice. Because I was raised to value passion over partnership, and I didn't understand that real love is built slowly, carefully, through shared moments and genuine connection. I threw away something precious for something that was never real. Pretty words. True words. Arabella, I'm not asking you to take me back today. I'm asking for a chance to prove I've changed. Let me visit again. Let me get to know our daughter. And let me show you, through actions, not words, that I can be the man you deserve. Arabella looked at him holding their daughter, saw the genuine emotion in his eyes, the remorse carved into every line of his face. She wanted to say yes, but she also wanted to protect herself, to guard against more hurt. 1 visit per month, she said finally, here at Thornbury Hall. You may come and spend time with Beatrice, but this doesn't mean we're reconciled, Alexander. It just means I'm willing to let you be a father to our daughter. Thank you, he breathed. Thank you, Arabella. I swear I won't disappoint you. You already have disappointed me, she said quietly. Now you get the chance to surprise me. He left an hour later, after reluctantly returning Beatrice to Arabella's arms. As she watched his carriage disappear down the drive, Sarah came to stand beside her. "What do you think?" the companion asked. "Is he sincere?" "I don't know," Arabella admitted, "but I suppose we'll find out." The visits continued throughout the winter. Alexander came every month, arriving precisely on time, bearing thoughtful gifts, books for Arabella, toys for Beatrice, and once a beautiful painting of Thornbury Hall that he'd commissioned. He never pushed, never demanded more than Arabella was willing to give. He simply showed up, spent time with his daughter, and gradually, carefully, began to rebuild something fragile with his wife. They talked about everything, their childhoods, their fears, their hopes for Beatrice's future. Alexander told her about the changes he'd made in London, how he'd fired the servants who'd been loyal to Lady Sinclair, how he'd reorganized his business affairs to be more ethical and less focused on profit. "I want to leave Beatrice a legacy she can be proud of," he said one afternoon while the baby napped between them. "Not just money and property, but actual good in the world." "That's admirable," Arabella said. "It's overdue." He looked at her, his green eyes serious. "Arabella, I know you said we're not reconciled, but I need you to know that I've fallen in love with you." She froze. "Alexander, not the way I thought I loved Vivian, not that shallow, selfish infatuation, but real love. The kind that makes me think of you first thing in the morning. The kind that makes me want to know what you think about everything. The kind that makes me ache when I have to leave you at the end of each visit. You can't just decide you love me after everything. I'm not deciding. I'm discovering. Or maybe I'm finally admitting what I've felt for a long time, but was too proud and stupid to acknowledge." He reached for her hand carefully, waiting for permission. She gave it. "When we first married, I thought you were beautiful but boring. I thought passion only came from drama and conflict. I didn't understand that the quiet strength you showed every day, the grace you maintained even when I was cruel to you, the intelligence you hid because I never asked to see it, that was far more captivating than any performance."
Arabella felt her defenses crumbling, but fought to maintain them. "Words are easy, Alexander. Then let me prove it with actions. Come back to London. Not to the townhouse. I've bought a new house, one with no history of locked rooms or mistresses. Let me show you the life we could have. Let me introduce you to society as the woman I'm proud to call my Duchess. London society thinks I'm a recluse, or worse, that you banished me because I was inadequate."
Then well correct that impression. Together, his grip on her hand tightened. "Arabella, I want the world to see what I see. A woman of strength and dignity who deserves to be celebrated, not hidden away. I want to dance with you at balls and escort you to the opera and make every other man in London jealous that you're mine. I'm not a possession, Alexander. No, you're my partner, if you'll have me." Beatrice woke then, making small fussing sounds, and the moment broke. But as Arabella lifted her daughter and settled her to nurse, she caught Alexander watching them both with such profound tenderness that her heart ached. Maybe he had changed. Maybe he was sincere. Or maybe this was all just another elaborate manipulation. She didn't know, but she was starting to want to find out. "I'll think about it," she said quietly, "about London. But Alexander, if I come, it's not as your submissive wife. It's as your equal partner. I won't be silent or invisible or convenient anymore." "I wouldn't want you to be," he said. "I want you exactly as you are, fierce and honest and magnificent." After he left that day, Arabella sat with Sarah and Lady Marguerite's latest letter, trying to decide what to do. "London is dreadfully dull without you," Lady Marguerite had written. "Though I must confess, your husband has become somewhat interesting lately. He's been attending parliamentary sessions and actually speaking about factory reform and women's education. People are starting to call him the Reformed Duke. I'm not sure if it's genuine or performance, but it's certainly an improvement over the wastrel he was being." "What's your heart telling you?" Sarah asked. "That I'm terrified," Arabella admitted. "What if I go back and he reverts to his old ways? What if this is all an act that falls apart the moment I'm no longer convenient? Then you leave again, but this time you'll know you gave him a fair chance." Sarah smiled. "You're not the same woman who fled London, Your Grace. You're stronger now. He can't lock you in towers anymore. You know how to pick locks and climb out windows." Arabella laughed despite herself. "That's a terrible metaphor, but accurate." That night, Arabella wrote 2 letters. One to Alexander, agreeing to return to London for the season with strict conditions about her autonomy and Beatrice's welfare. And one to Lady Marguerite, asking if she would sponsor Arabella's re-entry into society. "My dear Duchess," Lady Marguerite wrote back immediately, "I would be delighted to sponsor your return. In fact, I'm already planning the most spectacular ball London has seen in years. We'll make them all remember who the true Duchess of Ravenscroft is. And if your husband disappoints you again, I have a very comfortable spare room and a scandal-proof reputation. You'll always have a place to land. Yours in conspiracy, Marguerite." They returned to London in April, when the season was in full swing. Alexander had been true to his word. The new house in Belgrave Square was beautiful, filled with light, and contained no locked rooms. Arabella's suite was connected to Alexander's, but with her own entrance and complete privacy. Beatrice had her own nursery with a staff Arabella had personally vetted, and Alexander had hired the best nurse in London to care for her. "She's our daughter," he'd said when Arabella questioned the expense. "Nothing is too good for her, or for you." The first test came the day after their arrival, when Alexander proposed they attend the opera together. "It will be our first public appearance as a united couple," he said. "I want everyone to see us together, to see that our marriage is strong." "Is it strong?"
Arabella asked. Or are we play acting for society? That depends on you, Alexander said honestly. I'm not play acting, Arabella, but I understand if you need more time. They went to the opera. And when they entered the Duke's box together, every head in the theater turned to stare. Arabella wore emerald silk that Alexander had commissioned for her, with the Ravencraft diamonds glittering at her throat. She looked every inch a duchess. Alexander kept his hand at the small of her back, a gesture of support and possession that made her skin tingle. Throughout the performance, he whispered observations that made her laugh, shared his opera glasses when she wanted a better view, and looked at her with such obvious devotion that she could feel the gossip spreading like wildfire. During the interval, Lady Marguerite swept into their box, magnificent in purple taffeta. "Darling," she exclaimed, embracing Arabella, "you look absolutely triumphant. The entire theater is talking about how radiant you are. I've heard at least 3 people say that the Duke looks utterly besotted." Alexander bowed to Lady Marguerite. "Lady Blackwood, thank you for your friendship to my wife. I understand you've been a great support to her. Someone had to be, Your Grace, when you were being an absolute fool." Lady Marguerite's smile was sharp. "But I hear you've reformed. Let's hope it takes." "It will," Alexander said firmly. "I have too much to lose if it doesn't." The rest of the season was a whirlwind. Alexander took Arabella to every ball, every soirée, every garden party. He danced with her constantly, introduced her to his political colleagues, and made it clear to everyone that his wife was his partner in all things. But the real test came when they encountered Lady Vivian Sinclair at the Duchess of Marlborough's ball. Vivian had fallen far since her affair with Alexander ended. Her husband had learned of her infidelities and divorced her in a spectacular scandal, leaving her with a small settlement and a ruined reputation. She'd aged visibly, the beauty that had captivated Alexander now hardened by bitterness. She approached them directly, her eyes glittering with malice. "Duke Ravencroft," she purred, "and the little Duchess. How domestic you've become." "Lady Sinclair," Alexander said coldly, "I don't believe you were on the guest list." "Marchioness Pemberton invited me. She felt sorry for me, I think." Vivian's eyes slid to Arabella. "Tell me, Duchess, does it bother you that your husband only came back to you because I discarded him?" Arabella felt Alexander tense beside her, but she placed a hand on his arm. This was her fight. "Actually," she said calmly, "I'm grateful to you, Lady Sinclair." Vivian blinked, thrown off balance. "Grateful?" "Yes. You revealed my husband's weaknesses at a time when we could address them. You showed me exactly who I was married to, which allowed me to decide whether to fight for my marriage or abandon it. And you removed yourself from his life, which saved me the trouble of having to do it myself." "I didn't remove myself. He begged me to stay." "He ended our association," Alexander said, his voice like ice. "After I discovered you'd been embezzling from me and selling information to my rivals. You're a thief and a liar, Vivian, and I thank God every day that I came to my senses before you destroyed me completely." Vivian's face flushed scarlet. "You'll regret this, both of you." "No," Arabella said softly, "we won't, but I think you already do." Lady Sinclair fled, and Arabella watched her go with something like pity. The woman had traded love for manipulation, substance for spectacle, and now she had nothing. "That was magnificent," Alexander whispered, pressing a kiss to Arabella's temple. "You're magnificent." "I'm tired of letting people make me feel small," Arabella said. "I'm the Duchess of Ravencroft, and it's time I started acting like it."
The ball continued around them, but Arabella felt something shift. She'd faced her husband's mistress and emerged victorious, not through drama or tears, but through quiet dignity and truth. She was taking back her life, her name, her power, and London was starting to notice. The transformation of the Duke and Duchess of Ravencroft became the talk of the season. Society columnists wrote about Arabella's elegance, her wit, her obvious intelligence. They praised Alexander's devotion to his wife, his progressive political views, his dedication to his family. The true Duchess, one columnist called Arabella, contrasting her with the pretenders and social climbers who chase titles without earning them. But the real change happened in private, in the quiet moments between grand social events. One evening, after they'd returned from a particularly exhausting ball, Alexander found Arabella in the library, still in her ball gown, reading. "You looked beautiful tonight," he said, from the doorway. "Thank you. May I come in?" She nodded, and he sat across from her, studying her face in the firelight. "Arabella, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. All right. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? Not just tolerate me, not just coexist with me, but truly forgive me for what I did to you?" She set down her book and considered the question carefully. "I don't know," she said finally. "Some days, when I see you with Beatrice, when you're gentle and present and everything I hoped you'd be, I think maybe I already have forgiven you. But then I remember being locked in that room, feeling so utterly alone and unwanted, and the anger comes back. That's fair. But Alexander, forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. Even if I forgive you completely, I'll never forget what happened. It changed me. It made me harder in some ways, but also stronger." "I don't want to make you hard," he said quietly. "You don't have a choice. What's done is done. The question is whether you can love the woman I've become, not the naive girl you married." "I can." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I do. The woman you've become is everything I never knew I needed. You're strong where I'm weak, brave where I'm cowardly, honest where I've been deceptive. You make me want to be better. That's not my job, Alexander. I can't fix you. I know, and I'm not asking you to. I've been working with a physician, a specialist in matters of the mind, trying to understand why I made the choices I did, why I ran from intimacy toward conquest." He smiled sadly. "Turns out I have some issues with my parents' cold marriage and some deeply ingrained beliefs about masculinity and power. It's been enlightening and humiliating in equal measure." Arabella felt something soften in her chest. "You're seeing a physician? About your behavior?" "Every week. And I've been reading philosophy, attending lectures on ethics and duty. I'm trying to rebuild myself into someone worthy of you and Beatrice." He hesitated. "It might take a lifetime, but I'm committed to it." "Why?" Arabella asked. "Why are you doing all this?" "Because I love you. Because I destroyed the best thing in my life through my own stupidity, and I'm determined not to make that mistake again. Because when I hold our daughter, I see the man I want to be reflected in her eyes, and that man is nothing like the Duke who locked his wife in a tower." Arabella stood and walked to him, her ball gown rustling. She cupped his face in her hands, studying the changes she'd seen over the past months, the softening around his eyes, the vulnerability in his expression, the way he looked at her now as if she were precious. "I'm starting to forgive you," she whispered. "It's slow and it's difficult, and some days I take 3 steps backward. But I'm trying, Alexander, because despite everything, I think I'm falling in love with you too. Not the Duke I married, but the man you're becoming." His breath caught. "Arabella, don't make me regret this," she said fiercely.
Because if you do, I swear I'll take Beatrice and disappear, and you'll never find us." "I won't," he promised, covering her hands with his. "I swear on everything I hold sacred, I will never hurt you again." She believed him, or at least she wanted to believe him enough to try. She kissed him then, soft and careful, and felt something click into place. Not perfect reconciliation, not complete healing, but the beginning of something new. A marriage built on truth instead of duty, on mutual respect instead of obligation. When they finally pulled apart, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he breathed, "for giving me another chance, for being brave enough to try again." "Don't thank me yet," Arabella said. "We still have a lot of work to do." "I know, but for the first time in my life, I'm actually looking forward to the work." They stood together in the library, holding each other, while outside, London slept, unaware that in the heart of Belgrave Square, a duke and duchess were rewriting their own story. One honest conversation, one genuine moment at a time. 6 months later, at Lady Marguerite's spectacular summer ball, Arabella stood at the top of the grand staircase in a gown of silver and white, with the Ravencroft diamonds blazing at her throat and wrists. Beside her, Alexander wore black evening clothes that made his green eyes vivid, and in his arms, their daughter Beatrice, now nearly a year old, gurgled happily, reaching for the chandeliers. The ballroom fell silent as they were announced. The Duke and Duchess of Ravencroft, and Lady Beatrice Thornbury. They descended together, and as they reached the bottom of the stairs, the entire room, every Duke and Duchess, every Marquess and Viscountess, every member of London's elite society, bowed. Not just to the Duke, to all three of them, to the family, but most especially to Arabella.
"The true Duchess," someone whispered, and the title spread through the room like wildfire. Lady Marguerite swept forward, resplendent in gold silk, and embraced Arabella warmly. "You did it," she whispered. "You made them all see what I saw from the beginning, that you're the strongest person in this room." "I couldn't have done it without you," Arabella said. "Nonsense. I simply provided the stage. You provided the performance." Lady Marguerite turned to Alexander. "And you, Your Grace, have exceeded my very low expectations. Congratulations on becoming worthy of your wife." Alexander laughed. "Thank you, Lady Blackwood, I think." The ball continued around them, and Alexander and Arabella danced the first waltz together, Beatrice having been whisked away to the nursery by her devoted nurse. "Are you happy?" Alexander asked as they moved across the floor. Arabella considered the question. She thought about the journey they'd taken, from locked rooms and betrayal to this moment of public triumph. She thought about the scars she still carried, the trust they were still rebuilding, the work that remained. But she also thought about the mornings she woke to find Alexander reading to Beatrice, his voice soft with love. About the evenings they spent in the library, debating politics and philosophy. About the way he looked at her now, with respect and admiration and genuine affection. "I'm getting there," she said honestly. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible." He pulled her closer, propriety be damned. "You've given me everything, Arabella. A daughter, a purpose, a reason to be better. And somewhere along the way, you gave me your heart again. I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful for it every day." "You're earning it," she corrected, "one day at a time. Then I'll keep earning it for the rest of our lives." The waltz ended, and the ballroom erupted in applause. But Arabella and Alexander stood together in the center of the floor, holding each other, while around them London's elite society celebrated not a scandal, not a divorce, not a dramatic downfall, but something far more radical. A marriage that had broken and healed. A woman who had been imprisoned and freed herself. A man who had been lost and found his way back. A family that had survived betrayal and emerged stronger. The true Duchess had returned to London, and she had conquered it completely, not through manipulation or performance, but through the quiet power of dignity, strength, and unwavering self-worth. She had won, not just society's approval, but her own respect, and that was worth more than all the diamonds in the world. As the night wore on and the dancing continued, Arabella caught Alexander's eye across the ballroom. He smiled at her, a real smile, full of warmth and promise and hope. She smiled back. And in that moment, Arabella knew that whatever came next, whatever challenges they faced, she would face them as she always had. With courage, with grace, with the unshakable knowledge that she was enough, that she had always been enough, and that no locked door or cruel word could ever take that truth away from her again. The true Duchess stood in the center of London society, her head high, her heart healing, her future bright with possibility. And the entire world bowed before her. The end.